Hey guys, and welcome to this new video. So today marks a monumentous occasion, to say the least, because today is the day that I step forward and proclaim my undying love for Mr. Bungle. I had the great pleasure of seeing Mr. Bungle live at London a couple days ago as of recording this, for their very first time touring in the UK in like 20 years, I think. It goes without saying, it was fucking amazing. I got shirts, I bought merch, and I saw some fucking cracking songs. But their set list was full of surprises. We'll get into the actual show at the end of this video, I think, because there is one main reason why you're watching this probably, and that's the album ranking itself of Mr. Bungle. Now obviously, Mr. Bungle don't have that many albums. They have only 4 to be exact, but what that does do is leave me a bit of wiggle room to be able to go through Mr. Bungle's discography with a fine-tooth comb and point out all the things that I love about this band. This list unfortunately won't be including any of the 80s demos that they did, because as much as I love Bowl of Chile and the original Raging Raph demo and Goddamn I Love America and OU818, that unfortunately don't stack up to their full-length albums that we're talking about in this video. But maybe I could save that for a future video, maybe, if it's something you guys want to see. But with all that ramble out of the way, we're going to rank their studio albums, starting with their most recent one, the Raging Raph of the Easter Bunny demo. This may come as a shock, because I'm the self-proclaimed metalhead. Why did I rank the thrashy death metal album last of all of Bungle's albums? Well, I'll get to that. But table dressing first. This is obviously their first album that they've made, with a 20-year gap separating this from their 99 album, California. And to go from their sound in California to then this is fucking hilarious. This record is obviously based off of their original Raging Raph of the Easter Bunny demo. You could hear the heavy like Slayer, Sepultura influences in that demo, and they've managed to translate them perfectly into a much more polished production for one, and also just a refined sound overall, I feel. The band has always done what people least expect, which is why going from an album like California to then this is just so Bungle. And it was a great idea to reattempt old material that they wrote as kids, but with a older mindset, like a more matured mindset as well. And as well as that, the inclusion of Scott Ian and Dave Lombardo was the perfect fucking marriage for this thing to work. And it was their inclusion in Mr. Bungle what turned me on to this thing coming out. Otherwise, this thing might have passed me by when it originally released, and I would have been devastated if that would have been the case. Right, let's go into the track by track. Erasist is probably my favourite on here. In an album full of fast, full pelt thrash metal, Erasist is like the black sheep of the lot. It's more slower and groovier, akin to like a Pantera track in some ways. Sudden Death and Raping Your Mind are monstrously vicious songs, the two of them. Those are probably my 2 favourites if it went for Erasist. Gluten for Punishment and Bungle Grind are 2 groovy thrashes as well. Also, I did love the inclusion of the Love as a Fist riff in Mathematics. Even though I guess if this material was written before they're self-titled, then I guess that riff originated in Mathematics. The cover of COC's Lost for Words is cool as well. They did do that song justice. Also, their SOD cover of Speak English or Die, or I guess Speak Spanish or Die in this case, was also excellent, and also excellently fun. It's the most fun track to listen to on the album. Also, can I just say, the song titles on this album are hilarious. Spreading the Thighs of Death, Bungle Grind, Gluten for Punishment, Raping Your Mind. They have a knack for doing that, don't they? Anarchy Up Uranus. It's just a lot of sardonic fun throughout this entire thing. But one word to describe this album, all in all, is just feral. Particularly Mike Patton. I feel like Mike Patton must have damaged his voice recording this album. It's just guttural and heavy. His screeches and squeals are just over the top. They really are. They really went for the thrashy homage that this is. Quick note on the original demo that this is based on. That thing is pioneering as hell, because those are like some of the first sightings of like death kind of metal ever, I think, because the original demo this is based on came out before Possessed Seven Churches and Scream Bloody Gore, which tells me that Bungle could have, in a different timeline, been the creators of death metal, which is crazy to me. But anyway, that's my last note on it. It's excellent though. It's one of the heaviest thrash albums of all time, and yet also like so much fun. I think the main criticism with some thrash metal these days is they take themselves too seriously, but not Bungle. Quite the opposite. But anyway, that was the Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny demo. Now we move on to my third favourite Bungle album. Right, this one might ruffle some feathers, but I'd like to remind you all watching that all 4 of the Bungle albums that I'm talking about in this video are among like my favourite albums ever made. Like, they could have gone in any order, and me preparing for this video, attempting to rank one above another was frankly excruciating. So keep that in mind, that my third favourite Bungle album is their self-titled. To sum this album up, it's a freak show carnival with metal. I go to every one of these albums they've made for a different purpose. For Raging Wrath, I obviously go there for letting off some steam, or to thrash about. For the heaviness is why I go there. For this, I go to this album to cheer me up, because it's the most wacky, zany, off-the-wall bad shit crazy. Like, it is so fun and funny to listen to, with just the music in this and the skits as well. It just makes for an absolute blast to listen to. This album is packed to the brim with so many weird ideas. The genres and styles, it's kind of impossible to pin down Bungle for what genre they're going for on any given album. But I guess if you were to simplify this down, I guess funk metal would be a word to describe it, even though it doesn't encompass the entire scope. Also, props to John Zorn. The fact that John Zorn produced this album might be another reason why I love this album. Because he's a jazz player, he kind of knew the mission when going into the concepts on this thing. And though it does have jazz elements, it is riffs galore, spoken word skits all over this thing, strange vocal takes, ska, jazz rock, just so much. There's just so much crammed into this thing. Speaking of the skits though, they are fun to listen to, and they do cheer me up, make me giggle sometimes, and they do add to the album's charm, definitely. But some of them could be grating and annoying. Some even maybe sound a bit repulsive at times, like, why do I need to hear Mike Patton drop a fat dookie? All in all, they're fun and they have their place for the album, but some of them might get on your nerves when you're listening to this thing. Just a warning for you. Anyway, track by track, Love as a Fist has such a fucking awesome riff. Same with My Ass is on Fire, which also, that song is the perfect song to play when you're on the toilet after a hot curry. Stub a Dub is a perfect song. It is one of the best Bungle songs of all time. I fucking love it to pieces. It goes from sweet to frantic to somber, then back to frantic. It goes all over the place. Same with Egg. Egg is just off the walls bad shit crazy. That song in particular. Dead Goon is atmospheric and kind of foreshadows Disco Volante, which is fun because Dead Goon is the final track on self-titled. Their opening though, Travolta, renamed to quote unquote, after a strange legal dispute with John Travolta. Anyway, that song is a groovy opener, very, very fun. Squeeze Me Macaroni and Carousel are just so jazzy and funky, and Girls of Porn, it's catchy as fuck, but is also a song that I will never listen to with company. For obvious reasons, if you know the lyrics, then you know, especially family members. Slowly Growing Deaf is also a lot of fun. This album as a whole, its influence can't be understated. It's been talked to death about how much influence this album had on late 90s, early 2000s metal. Like, Korn cited this album as influence, so did Avenged Sevenfold. Thank you, Bungle, for that. Very much appreciated. Same with System of a Down, I think. This album overall is just a fun, heavy metal circus. But when this album came out, it wasn't received very well. All the reviews were calling this thing unlistenable, and well, we'll get to that when we get to it. But yeah. Right, going back to what I said earlier in the video, all 4 of the Bungle albums I love to pieces are considered among my favourite albums of all time. These top 2 are literally both albums that have a safe place in my top 10 albums ever. Both of them do. So please understand that I'm only putting one of these 2 albums above another because I have to for this video, but just understand that they are practically neck and neck for me, and I love these next 2 albums pretty much equally, but I just had to put a number to these last 2 albums here. So let's talk about California first. So, in the context of Bungle's history, they start with the self-titled, then they get onto their second release, which we'll get to after this one, which is the most off-the-walls, weird thing ever. Listeners start to think that they've got Mr. Bungle pinned down as the avant-garde metal band that they've been so far. But just when they think they do another left turn in the opposite direction, literally, and release their most accessible album ever. Like, think 60s rock. This album is the most anthemic and accessible, which is funny to say that because this album is still way more creative and ambitious than any of its contemporaries. Now, though I enjoy the skits on their first two albums a lot, most of them at least, I think the absence of the Bungle skits on this album make the songs shine more, I believe. Let's go into them, shall we? Ars Moriendi has cool Eastern style metal riffs in it. Sweet Charity is straight up just a beach surfer soundtrack. Pink Cigarette is the gloomiest, most somber song they've ever done, only made more sad when you look into the lyrics behind the song. None of them knew they were robots, and Air Conditioned Nightmare are tied for being my favourite song on this album. Both of them are just so energetic and catchy. The Holy Filament has such a creepy edge to it and just such a dense atmosphere. As for Vanity Fair, so bombastic and also sugary in tone, I think. As for Retro Vertigo, which was the first Mr. Bungle song I ever heard, and still have a soft spot for this song to this day. That song in and of itself is also creepy and doomy, almost. And the grooviness in the Bionic Vapor Boy and Goodbye Sober Day cannot be understated. Those songs just, the bass like rumbles in your bones, and you really do groove along to those ones. Despite this album being the least abrasive of their albums, it still goes all out and somehow manages to show you the widest range of what Mr. Bungle is capable of as a band. The scope of genres that this album encompasses is almost more impressive than their previous ones because of how restrained this album feels overall, which is why I've always tackled between this one being my favourite or this next album, which we'll talk about right now, which, if you've been paying attention, is Disco Volante. Now, why did I leave this for last instead of California? I honestly don't know. I think it is just the impact that this album left on me. Like, the moment-to-moment stuff on this one does stick in my head a bit more than California, which is why in my own headcanon, this is my number one for this video. But that could change the second I stop recording. I could go back and say that California is my number one and want to redo this whole video. But I won't. Let's instead just get on with it and talk about why Disco Volante is so great, in my opinion at least. Going back to what I said about the self-titled, Bungle said, "Oh, you want unlistenable? I'll give you unlistenable." And obviously that's all jest. This album isn't unlistenable, despite what a lot of the reviews of this one might say. They make it off the wall and insane, while still making it musical and catchy in parts. The thing I love about music the most, and the albums that stick with me the most, are the ones that leave me almost shocked as to what I heard, or feeling like challenged by what I listened to, and then wanting to go back and listen again. Which, granted, all of the Bungle albums have done, but this one has had the strongest of impacts in that regard to me. This album is essentially, if David Lynch made an album, this is the closest to what it would sound like. Now, I listen to a lot of strange heavy music, but to this day, I have not found music that sounds even close to what this album was attempting. And trust me, I looked, and that is so fascinating to me, and I want to know why. They set out to create something that has never been done before with music, and they certainly succeeded at that. This album is confidently the most off-the-wall, insane albums released by a major label. This album captures the absurdism side of music and is essentially a showcase of how weird you can go with it. This album literally takes you off the deep end of what music can be. Carry Stress in the Jaw is as a top 10 favourite song of all time, any band. It just does whatever the fuck it wants and doesn't care what you think about it. Backstroking is such a creepy but chill, serene vibe at the same time, and I don't know how they did that. Violence Domestica is atmospheric as fuck, and Chemical Marriage is so catchy. And speaking of catchy, Desert Search for Techno Allah is nuts, but somehow sounds exactly how its name suggests. Everyone I went to high school with is dead is straight up just sludge metal, and to open the album with this does set you up for how abrasive the album will sound. Phlegmatics is such a mindfuck of a song and is one of my favourites on here. Same with Platypus. It's so unhinged, but it's also brash and heavy. The best part about this album and all the songs in it, it feels so improvisational, but because of how much it does, they had to have planned out every second and minutia of this thing. There's no way they could have improvised any of the shit that goes on in this. All the little flourishes and the genre switching within the same song, like going from jazz, then to metal, then to funk, then to other weird niche genres that I don't even know the name of. The shock and novelty of this album still has not worn off for me, despite like my 50 plus listens that I've had of this thing from front to back by now. Every time I listen to it, I find a new thing that I didn't hear before. It is designed to invade your personal bubble, and that's kind of the best way to describe this thing. It feels uncomfortable to listen to at times, but it also has so many satisfying payoffs musically, and just so many creative ideas that you'd never imagine that you could do in an album. But they do. I can't be understated how weird this thing is. But yeah, that's me done. That's my ranking. So, like I say, it's a tentative ranking. The top 2 spots could be like flipped in either order. But Bungle as a band is one of my favourites of all time. And if you had not heard of Mr. Bungle before this video, then I hope that I've put you on to your new favourite band. But speaking of the show I went to, it was fucking amazing. I obviously bought my fair share of merch, as you can see here. And the show itself was exactly what I hoped it would be. The stage antics were so much fun. The music they played was also so much fun. It was just a blast the whole way through. It really was. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video as much as I did talking about a band that I love so much. But I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.
Ah!